Each year, Microsoft Research hosts hundreds of influential speakers from around the world, including leading scientists, renowned experts in technology, book authors, and leading academics, and makes videos of these lectures freely available.
So the title of my presentation is Search Engines Considered Harmful. So under this title, what I want to talk about is the impact of the search engines on the evolutions of the web pages, especially about the perceptions of the users on the popularity and the quality of the pages. So the research, we started this research about 2 years ago. And we started it, I kind of got the idea for this research when I was browsing through some news articles. And in one of the news articles, one person at that point, the article is mainly about how popular Google is and how much influence it has, etc. And in that article, one person mentions that even the market share that Google has in the search space, in the web search space, the person claims that if you're not now indexed by Google, then you don't exist on the web. So this is a kind of scary proposition, but it has, I think, a little bit of truth in there, because at least when I think about myself, when I want to look for some information, that what I do is I go to a search engine, right, and I type in some keywords and I look at some of the results. And if the result is there, then I'm very happy. And if the result is not there, then essentially I kind of give up. Given that there are just so many pages that are available out there, currently Google claims that they index about 8 billion documents or 8 billion objects. So given that there are so many pages, it's almost impossible for me personally to look at all these pages to figure out what are the pages that are potentially relevant to the information that I have at that particular point of time. So in some sense, although this person kind of phrased it under the term Google, in some sense, if you generalize it a little bit more, in some sense, now what people perceive from the web today is not necessarily what is really out there, like on the real web, but something that is processed and presented by one of these very popular search engines. Because people do not have the time, they just rely on the search engine for them to identify what is interesting and what is relevant and what is high quality. So given this fact, we started to wonder whether or how much influence Google or general search engines have on the popularity or the evolution of the web, and like what kind of influences have and what are the potential impact of those influences. And when you think about this influence or bias by the search engine, the main primary cause of search engine power is mainly due to the fact that people just look at the top few pages that the search engines return. Okay? So out of all the pages that search engines rank or return to the user, they just kind of, with high probability, they click on the first few results, but the pages that are ranked at the bottom, almost nobody clicks on them, or only very few people click on it. And because of that, if a page is ranked at the top, then more people will look at those pages and their popularity and the user awareness may increase over time. While if a page is ranked at the bottom, then nobody may get eventually aware of that page because nobody looks at those pages. And what is really worrisome, given this fact, is that current generation search engines rely heavily on the popularity of the pages. So for example, Google claims that PageRank is one of their the most important metric that they're considering when they evaluate the quality of the pages or the importance of the pages. So if a page is very popular in terms of PageRank or whatever metric that you can think about, let's say click-through information or whatever, then those pages tend to appear at the top. Okay? And given this current ranking metric, it seems that the popular pages may get more popular over time, while unpopular pages, even if they're really high quality, or if they're not very popular at this point, they may never have a chance to become popular. So the main question that I want to talk about today is, how much of this bias do search engines introduce to the existing web, to the today's web? And what might be a good remedy, what might be a good solution to avoid or to reduce this potential bias? So in this presentation, in order to kind of study this problem, investigate this problem, we will go over roughly 3 topics. And the first topic is more of an experimental study, where we want to see whether this particular problem that I will refer to as rich get richer problem. The popular pages are getting more popular and unpopular pages are kind of getting less popular over time, whether that particular phenomenon is indeed happening on the current web or not by investigating some set of web pages and some set of websites. Okay? So that is the first experimental study to see whether that is happening. And after that, I will try to see how much of that phenomenon that we observe is because of the search engine bias. Because search engines tend to kind of make the popular pages more popular, or do they really make this kind of significant skews in terms of the popularity evolution? What is because of the search engine bias, and what is because of people's natural evolution of the web pages? Because those are really high quality. Okay? So that is the second part that I will talk about, trying to understand how much is because of the search engine. And after that, I will talk about some of our ideas on how we may be able to reduce some of these biases that I've been talking about. And I welcome any questions that you have, or so feel free to raise your hand and ask any questions if something is not clear, or if something you don't agree with some of my conclusions. So let me start with the first experimental study, where we try to understand whether, or examine whether the rich get richer problem is happening on the real web or not. So in order to measure or observe this phenomenon, essentially what we did was that we downloaded about roughly 4 million pages every week from somehow I don't see, oh yes, okay. So we roughly downloaded about 4 million pages every week for a period of 1 year. And from that, we essentially kind of constructed a weekly link graph to see which pages are popular and how their popularity evolves over time. And the way that we selected these pages was we kind of selected the top size from each categories of the Open Directory. Open Directory is kind of the collaborative directory that is maintained by these individual editors, very similar to Google categories. So in order to cover different parts of the web, kind of have some representative samples of the different parts of the web, we, for each category of the Open Directory, we selected the top size. And in total, we monitored about 154 sites. And from each of these sites, we downloaded almost all the contents, all the pages every week. Okay? And then we essentially constructed a link graph from these pages. And given this constructed web link graph, it is reasonably straightforward to see which one is more popular than the other based on the link popularity. Okay? So there are many different ways of coming up with the link popularity, and the simplest mechanism is just counting how many other pages are pointing to a particular page, or more sophisticated approach might be PageRank that Google is kind of proposed in their beginning. Okay? So in the rest of this presentation, I will talk about first talk about the simple link count. So the way that we try to observe this popularity evolution is from the initial snapshot of the web that it took, we partition them into 10 different groups based on their initial popularity. So for the top 10% pages with the highest popularity, we put them in the first group, and the second group, and the third group, etc. And if, yeah.
What's your popularity? You mentioned using links or data.
Right.
What is it?
So right now, the first experiments that I will show is based on how many other pages are pointing to it. Simple link count.
In the partial crawl.
In the partial crawl that you have. Okay? So there are kind of two things that I have to clarify. One thing is that, so the popularity definition that I have for this particular one is based on the snapshot of the web that I capture. It's not the general web, but the particular snapshot or particular sample that I monitored over this 1 year period. But the second thing that I also want to emphasize is that the link graph that we constructed not only included the pages that we downloaded, but also the pages that these pages are pointing to. Okay? So most of the popular pages or some of the other pages, a lot of other pages are also kind of considered as part of this web evolution. So that is the popularity definition. So we grouped them into 10 different partitions. And if the rich get richer problem is indeed happening on the current web, then the first group that was most popular in the beginning will become even more popular over time. So the increase in the popularity will be much more significant for the first group than the bottom group. But if the increase in the popularity is kind of similar or uniform around all these different groups, then it kind of indicates that the rich get richer problem is not happening too much. So let me show you the results that you obtain from this simple investigation. So in this graph, again, using the simple link count metric, the horizontal axis shows the different 10 different groups. And this bar corresponds to the most popular group, and this portion corresponds to the least popular group. And the vertical axis shows the absolute increase in the number of links over this 7 period, for the first 7 kind of during the 7-month period that we monitored. Yeah. Increase in the links. Yeah.
Do you have the proportional increase?
The relative side. Yeah, relative. We also have that graph, but I can show it to you later. But it's kind of, the result is kind of similar, not much different. So here, if you look at this graph, we can clearly see that the popular pages are indeed getting more popular over time, because according to this graph, the top 20% that belong to this category obtained about 70% of the new links that were produced during this time period, while the bottom 60% of the pages that were not very popular in the beginning practically got no more new links during this period. Okay? So it shows that, it strongly indicates that the popular pages are getting even more popular. And this is the same kind of results when we use the PageRank as the popularity metric. So instead of using the simple link count, we computed the PageRank based on each of the snapshots, and we measured the increase or decrease of the PageRank over this 7-month period. And again, this bar corresponds to the most popular group, and this bar corresponds to the least popular group. And if you look at this graph, we can,
Did all these pages stay around for this period of time, or did some of them go stale?
some of the pages disappear, and some of the new pages appear during this time period. So for this particular results that I show here, these are only for those pages that stayed during our 7-month period that I show here.
See, I would have expected that the popular pages are more likely to survive, and the less popular pages are more likely to stale.
Right. So that might be the case.
This might increase the selection.
Yeah, the selection bias that we can kind of think about there, if we think about this a little bit more, that it kind of shows that the popular pages tend to stick around longer. Although, actually we did that investigation to see whether the popular pages actually stick around longer. We didn't see a significant correlation between the popularity and the lifespan of the pages. But even if there are significant biases, it will just introduce this bias, skew this bias a little bit more, because the popular pages will just stay there. A larger fraction of the pages will just show up at the top of the list. So, this one. Yeah, let me explain. Yeah. So let me explain that exactly what is happening here. So from here, one thing that you can see is that the result is kind of slightly more worrisome than on the previous case, because now for the popular group, they're actually increasing their popularity. But for the unpopular group, they're actually decreasing their popularity. And this is mainly because of the normalization effect of the PageRank. Okay? So for the simple link count, as long as the existing links do not disappear, their popularity will not decrease over time. But in case of PageRank, one property that PageRank has is that the summation of all the PageRank values are the same for different snapshots. So if some pages are gaining their popularity under the PageRank metric, then some pages should lose their popularity. And because these pages are actually increasing their popularity, some of these pages must have had decrease in their popularity. That is why we are observing this decrease in the popularity. And another interesting thing from this graph is that this part is actually, for this group, the pages are not actually changing their popularity too much under this metric. And that is mainly because of this random jump effect. How many people here are familiar with the PageRank? I assume almost there. Yeah. So because of the randomness factor. So there are this damping factor that people use, like usually 0.15 or some other number. So the lowest value that a particular page has is guaranteed to be 0.15. And a lot of pages belong to that category. And for those pages, essentially, there is no significant change between multiple snapshots. And that is why you're not seeing too much increases or decreases for these pages. Okay? So that is the results from our, based on the PageRank metric. So from this simple investigation, web evolution experiment, we could see that the rich get richer problem is actually happening. It's really happening on the web. And unpopular pages practically get no attention over this time period. Yeah.
So I was wondering, did you try and follow several pages over a longer time frame to see whether the price could downtrend at some point or even out? Is there an initial ramp up in popularity and then?
Actually, so yeah, there are two interesting questions here. So one question is, if you look at this kind of evolution of the pages, how their evolution kind of changes over time. We haven't experimentally investigated on a large scale of data, but we do have some kind of experimental anecdotal evidences of how they're evolving. So that is kind of the experimental side. But under the second topic, where we talk about the impact of the search engines, we will also kind of try to see what are the predicted evolution of the popularity for when search engines dominate the world, etc. So let me kind of go into that a little bit more under the second topic. Okay? So for the first topic, what we have seen is that the rich get richer problem is indeed happening. But what it doesn't answer is whether it's because that is kind of the bias or undesirable bias of the search engine, or whether it's because these popular pages are indeed high quality pages, so they do deserve this high popularity over time. Okay? So what is really kind of causing this phenomenon? Okay? So in order to kind of understand that question, now we are trying to see what might be a good way of somehow measuring the search engine bias. So let's start with some kind of hypothetical experiments under which we can kind of measure how much of the influence search engines has on this popularity bias. And then we will try to see how we may be able to actually implement those things. Okay? So in order to study this search engine bias, the first issue that you have to clarify is what do we mean by bias? Okay? So if you want to study the bias, then we first have to define what you mean by bias. Okay? What do you mean by bias? What do you really mean? It's kind of very subjective notion. So it's kind of difficult to define. But if you really kind of think about this terminology, bias, at least deep down in my mind, what I really mean is that there is some ideal ways of doing certain things. And there are some practical ways of doing certain things. And because this ideal way and practical ways are different, in some sense, there are some undesirable effects. Okay, so that is at least the way that I interpret this kind of terminology bias. So given that, what you have to figure out in order to scientifically study this bias, what you have to figure out is what will be the ideal way of ranking the web pages and how the current generation search engines rank the web pages and see how they are different and what are the implications of those differences. Okay? So the first thing that you have to figure out is, or that you have to agree on, is what will be the ideal way of ranking web pages. So what will be the ideal way of ranking web pages? The simple answer to that question is we somehow measure the intrinsic quality of the pages accurately, the real quality of those pages, and rank the pages based on their quality. So that might be the ideal way. The difficult question is exactly what do we mean by the quality of the pages? The quality is particularly very subjective notion because some people may consider some pages really high quality, but other people may kind of consider that those pages are completely junk pages that without any interesting content in there. So different people may have completely different judgment on the quality of the pages. Okay? So given this subjectivity, can we somehow come up with some objective way that at least many people can agree on? And so we thought about this problem because this is a very subjective problem. We thought about this problem for a while. And this is kind of the definition that at least many of us in our group kind of think is reasonable. Okay, so what is our definition? We define the quality of the page as the conditional probability that a person or average or random web person will like that page if the person looks at it. Okay, so what does this definition imply? So in principle, this definition, under this definition, we may be able to measure the quality of every page by showing all those pages to all web users and getting their feedbacks on which page they like and which page they don't like. So every page, the users indicate whether they like it or not. Okay, so if there are 2 pages, let's say page 1 and page 2, and if there are 10,000 web users, and if 8,000 users like the first page, then under this definition, the quality of the page is 0.8. And the second page, if 2,000 people like it, then the quality of that page is 0.2. Okay, so that is, yeah, it comes, yeah, that is.
So this is supposed to be irrespective of what the user is going to do. I can imagine liking a page in one circumstance and then not liking it for another circumstance.
Yeah, so maybe I should clarify that point here. So let's kind of, for now, let's think about a particular topic that the user is interested in right now. So in some sense, we are looking at a community of pages or a set of small subset of the web pages that are relevant to a particular topic. So let's say XML. Okay, so the users are interested in XML, so the user types in XML, and then they, in some sense, search engines have to rank the pages based on their relevance and quality under the kind of topic XML. Okay? So let's focus our attention on those set of pages and the users who are likely to issue those queries. Okay? So for those pages, what will be a good way of defining the quality of those pages? Yeah.
But then, given that, okay, you're saying you want it for a search engine, don't you really want to ask what is the chance that a page answers uniformly to like this query that a user will issue? I mean, the same set of users in that same topic may
Right.
really like a cute Flash cartoon.
Mm-hmm.
It might be a great page, but that measure of like is just far too broad. So the one that's really going to impact them and make a better static rank is the one that says, you know, the tiny percentage that is, if I choose a query at random, what is the chance of this page answers it? Or
So-
the page at purpose would it be better?
So I think there are 2 separate questions. So in some sense, the way that we can think about the search engine, the user's interaction with the search engine, is that they somehow have a particular topic in mind, and they go to a search engine, and somehow they kind of express it using some keywords. And the search engines return the set of pages that are relevant to that particular keyword. Okay? So if you want to consider or evaluate the overall evolution of the web, then we have to kind of consider which topic is more popular and how often they issue it and how often like these pages are returned by the search engine. Okay, so that is what we want to consider the entire set of web, like the overall evolution of the web. But here, our main primary concern is about the small community of the pages and small community of the users who are interested in a particular topic. So in some sense, what search engine does is the search engine doesn't rank the pages based on like general topic. What they do is, given a particular keyword, they somehow identify which are more likely to be higher quality than the other. That's what they do. So that's the primary kind of interest that you have in mind. Let's for now focus our attention on a small set of pages that are relevant to that topic and what will be the user's kind of feedback on those set of pages. Does it answer your question?
I think I was asking
Yeah.
more about the measure of quality. Like, are you asking if you like the page, if you find the page interesting, or are you asking if you find the page useful given the query that you issue? So these are 2 different ways.
Yeah. So in some sense, for now, let us focus. Let's assume that did you like the kind of the particular the page given the query that you had in mind? So for now, let's like it can be any definition, but for now, let's kind of assume that that is the definition that we are using. Okay. So yeah, so that is the definition. And in some sense, this is kind of a democratic measure of the quality. And I think this is particularly useful, especially when the kind of the definition or the quality is a very subjective notion. When there is the consensus is how to reach, then the best thing that you can do is just take the vote and try to see which one is likely to be liked by the largest number of people. So in some sense, what the search engine wants to maximize is that for the top results that they will return to the user and a lot of people will click on, they want to make sure that many people are likely to like that page after they look at the particular page, given a particular query.
What do you mean time emergency by that?
Uh-huh.
So, in terms of whether people like the page, and then you have a probability that's a probability.
Right.
Because what we're saying is you just order things by probability, I get that. I'm not quite sure what consensus means.
So in some
Probability and probability.
Right. So in some sense, what we want to do is, given the set of pages, given a query, and given the set of pages, we somehow want to agree on a particular ranking of the pages. And different people may have completely different ideas about what will be the ideal ranking. Okay? But
You aggregate it is fine in the probability.
yeah, so let me kind of explain that part. So what search engine has to do, is that they know, as a fact, they know that the most largest number of users will click on the first page, and the second largest number will click on the second page, etc. So they know that fact. And what they want to do is, when users click on those pages, they want to make sure that the users are happy with that particular page, because that is how people perceive of the quality of the pages. So given that, they have no idea about which user will like which page, because they don't have any information about the users, and in some sense, they cannot do semantic analysis of the pages. So what they want to do is, at the top pages, they want to place the page that largest number of users will like. Okay, so in that sense, yeah, right. So in that sense, that is how we rank the pages. Okay, so that is how we may want to rank the pages given the context that the search engine is given. But the way that the search engines are currently ranking the pages are based on this popularity metric, in particular, the link-based popularity metric, which is kind of the easiest measure from the snapshots of the web. Okay. So I will just briefly skip over these kind of slides. So the PageRank high-level idea is that if a lot of other pages are pointing to it, it means that those web authors may like that page. So it means that those pages are likely to be high quality than other pages. But under the PageRank, not every link is equal. In particular, if Yahoo page is pointing to a particular page, then that link is counted more than other pages, let's say random web page, like personal homepage, that's not in a big, very important. So in some sense, PageRank is a weighted popularity metric. And although there is this kind of simple interpretation, it also has kind of interesting theoretical interpretation, which essentially states that if the users are following the links randomly, so they just follow the links and click on any of these links with the same probability, then the page rank is equivalent to the probability that a user, random web surfer, will arrive at that page, right, when they click on these links randomly. Okay? So we will rely on this interpretation later on when you have to build some web user models. So given these kind of two things, one potentially ideal way of ranking the pages and how the search engines are currently ranking the pages, it's kind of straightforward that when all the pages have been given equal chance to be discovered by the users, then most likely the popularity has strong correlation with the quality. Because if everyone knows about the page, then the page that largest number of users like is likely to be the highest quality page given our definition. And also, if for the pages with high page rank values, or the pages that are very popular, it's very likely that they are very high quality pages, because in order for a page to be popular, many users must have discovered those pages and also have liked it. If the quality is low, then even if a lot of people may have looked at it, they may not like it, so the popularity cannot be too large. So in some sense, for high page rank pages, we can reasonably infer that they're likely to be high quality. But what about the low page rank pages? There are two interpretations. One interpretation is that a lot of people know about the page, but the quality is low, so not many people like it. But another interpretation is that simply not many people are aware of the page. In that case, even if it's very high quality, the page will have very low popularity. Okay? So one thing that we really have to study is exactly how much bias the low page rank introduces to this currently low popularity page. So in order to, yeah.
It's probably worth pointing out that real people are not random surfers. Real people will not click on links with uniform probability.
Yeah, yeah.
So it would be interesting to see a correlation between page rank and traffic to individual pages.
Yes, yes, that will be a very interesting study, yes, if you do have that kind of information, yes. So what we want to do, or ideally what we want to do in order to kind of study that phenomenon, so in order to see how much bias search engines introduce, we may want to split the user group, web user group, into a completely separated, completely isolated groups. And in one group, we prevent them from using search engines. So all they can do is using whatever other mechanism they have, they just randomly surf the web in some sense. And then we introduce a high quality new page that not many people are aware of, and see how the popularity of that page evolves over time. Okay, so that is one user group. And the other group, we let them use the search engine and introduce the same page and see how the popularity of that page evolves over time within that group. Okay? And by comparing how much longer or how much shorter it takes for a page to become popular eventually between these two groups, we can see how much impact the search engine has on the popularity evolutions of the pages. So this is the ideal way of investigating this problem. But of course, this is very difficult to conduct in practice because not many people would want to stay in this the first group where they cannot use the search engine. So all we can do, given this practical constraint, is having some user models on how the users kind of surf on the web, and then try to see how the popularity of the page may evolve over time under kind of in two different kind of models that kind of simulates or models the two different cases. Yes. Right.
Really, users prefer them exactly the same way.
Right.
If there's a vicious circle,
Yeah.
one of them might go very high, one of them might go very low.
Yeah. So yeah, let me kind of actually that's a very interesting idea that we also are interested in. And so in some sense, one thing that we can try is introduce two identical pages, but with two different popularity values. One is reasonably high popularity, and one is reasonably low popularity, and then see how their popularity diverges or converges over time. So that might be one interesting thing that we can do. Right now, we haven't kind of done the experiments yet because we haven't had the resources to introduce them and give different ratings to them. But that might be an interesting thing that we may be able to do. One thing that we can explore, although we haven't tried this yet, is look at some of the mirror sites that are available on the web, and over a long period of time that might be available at Internet Archive, how their popularity has evolved over time. Okay, so that might be another kind of ways of investigating how the current popularity impacts the future popularity, but we haven't done that particular experiment yet. So in the theoretical experiments, we're kind of trying to model these two different cases. So for the first model, what we call random surfer model, essentially we assume the random surfer model that kind of the PageRank uses. Okay, so people follow the links randomly, and they never use search engines. And the second model is what we call search dominant model, where the users always go to a search engine. Right? We assume a particular set of users who are interested in a particular topic, and they always go to a search engine, issue a keyword, and then they look at the results and are likely to click on the first few results than the bottom results. Okay? So we have this search dominant model, and let's compare the popularity evolution of the pages under these two different models. And in order to explain these models, let me briefly define some of the terminologies. So we define these three terms. One is simple popularity, which is the fraction of the web users that like the page at that particular point of time. Okay? So if there are 100,000 users, and if 10,000 users like the page P at the time, then the popularity of that page is 0.1. Okay? Simple popularity. And the second notion is visit popularity, or visit rate, which is defined as the number of users who visit that page within a unit time period. Okay? So if, let's say, in 1 year or 1 day, whatever unit time period is, if 10,000 people visit that page, then the visit popularity is 10,000. The third definition is awareness, which is the fraction of the web users who are aware of the page. Okay? So if out of 100,000 users, if 30,000 users are aware of the page, then the user awareness is 0.3. Okay? Yeah.
You have no measure of popularity among people who visit it or people who are aware of it?
Yeah, so let me kind of explain that kind of notion using our hypothesis later. So what we assume, let me explain later, and then we can kind of talk about it a little bit more. And given this definition, we can see this kind of relationship between the popularity and the quality and awareness. So awareness doesn't take into account whether the user liked the page or not. Okay? The popularity is only those users who are aware of the page in some sense and like it. Okay? So in order for a page to be popular, the user must have visited the page, should be aware of the page, and then like it. So in some sense, the probability to like the particular page for a random user is the probability for that user to be aware of that page and the probability to like it, which is captured by the popularity.
In real life, that seems horribly flawed, because you would not expect at all the same judgment of quality amongst the people who would be aware of it. People in general are going to judge a page on some programming API to be low. People who are aware of it might judge it to be very high. So to say the popularity in general is multiplied to people who are aware of that page by the quality of the general population of that page. Judgment seems huge.
So that part, I kind of agree. So if you just look at the individual pages, right? Of course, these numbers might not exactly match. Some pages might be positively popular in some sense. So the users who are aware of the page may like it much more than other pages. Some pages might be negatively popular in some sense. They're notorious, so the users who are aware of the page may not like the page too much. Right? So it may be possible based on the individual page basis. But in general, I think both of these phenomena are possible. So without any kind of evidence, any counter evidence, I think this is kind of the average behavior that you can kind of observe. Yeah. Awareness, yeah. The fraction of the users who are aware of the page. So we assume that whenever the users look at the page first time, they get aware of the page. That's our definition. So, yes. So the awareness. So awareness is the out of all the pages that you have, what fraction of the pages have been visited by certain fraction. Let me rephrase that. So if a page is visited by the same user multiple times, the awareness doesn't increase. The awareness increases only when the user visits the page first time. Then the person gets aware of the page, and the person never forgets about the page. That is the awareness.
And you don't take into account session time.
No, we don't take that into account. Yeah.
I was going to say, there's some precedent for this kind of a model in advertising, where advertisers are really pushing for two types of things. One is to get people to be aware of the
Right.
offer, and the second one is to buy the offer.
Mhm.
And they have a whole field of testing here.
Right.
With aiding on it.
Right.
This makes, I think this makes a lot of sense from that kind of perspective. Whether it's good for society or whatever.
Right. Yeah. Actually, yes. So we also feel that there must be some related work in the marketing, but we haven't kind of investigated that area too much. But if you know any references, we'll be excited to read
Well, this
those.
is more practice than scholarly work.
Okay.
Don't know about it. I know that when I worked for a former advertising group, they actually pay consultants to go measure awareness. I think it ought to be, if you just did a study on a search on Google for aided and unaided awareness.
Okay, great. Okay. So given this definition, let me now elaborate some of the assumptions that we are making for each of these models. So let me start with the random shuffle model. So for the random shuffle model, we assume to make two assumptions. One is what we call popularity equivalence hypothesis. And there the assumption is that the visit popularity is proportional to its simple popularity. So, and we get this assumption based on the random shuffle interpretation of the PageRank. Okay? So if you assume PageRank as the popularity metric, then according to the random shuffle interpretation, PageRank is proportional to the popularity, the probability the user will visit that page. So under that interpretation, popularity will be equivalent or proportional to the visit popularity. Okay, so that is the first assumption that we are making. And the second assumption, which is kind of a simplifying assumption, is that a visit, if a page is, we call it random visit hypothesis. So if a page is visited just now, then any user may have made that visit with equal probability. So any user can visit any page with equal probability. So that is the random visit hypothesis. And given these two definitions, it's reasonably straightforward to investigate how the popularity of the page evolves over time. So if we know the current popularity of the page, then based on the popularity equivalence hypothesis, we know how many users are visiting the page, and we know how much awareness will increase, and from there we know how popularity will increase. So after unit time interval, we know what's the new popularity value of that page. Okay? So we can repeat this process to get the complete evolution of the popularity. More precisely, we can construct this differential equation and solve this differential equation in order to see the popularity evolution of the page. And let me, and if you solve that differential equation, this is the equation that we get. And let me illustrate the results using this simple graph. So in this graph, we investigate how the popularity of the page evolves over time. When the quality of the page is really high, the quality value 1. And when its initial popularity is very low, 10 to the minus 8, which is like 1 out of 100 million people are aware of the page in the beginning, and other kind of some reasonable numbers for other parameters. So here, the horizontal axis is the time, and the vertical axis shows the popularity at the given point of time. And if you look at this result, one thing that we can observe is that a page goes through roughly 3 stages. In the infant stage, in the beginning, during the infant stage, the pages essentially get completely unnoticed by the general public. But at a certain point, somehow the page kind of started to get noticed by a large number of users, and this popularity kind of shoots up. It kind of increases quite rapidly, which is called as an expansion stage. And after a while, it arrives at the eventual popularity, and then it stabilizes there, okay, which is called maturity stage. Okay? So that is kind of one thing that you can observe from random circular model. And the second thing that you can observe is that it takes about, under this random circular model, it takes about 25 time units for the page to obtain its eventual popularity. We will compare this number against other numbers that we will observe later when we use the search dominant model, okay, to see how much bias search engines introduce.
So, when I was expecting this graph, and I know this is some decay in that, right? Because the other page, it's now mature, people like it, and there's some period of time when, okay, it's old news, right?
Right,
and,
right.
A news story would have this graph, and then we have the corresponding, okay, next year, nobody's going to.
Right.
It's just kind of a wrong model, or is that a good?
Actually, yes. Actually, that's a very good point. So one thing that we can also think about is that here our assumption is that quality is static. We assume the same quality value for the page for all the entire period of time. But in certain cases, quality might be a function of the time. So the quality may change over time. If the page is new, then the quality people might be interested in that, but over time the quality may decrease over time. So for this one, we get this graph because you assume the static quality. But you also have investigated what will happen if the quality changes over time. So we can also talk about that later. Of course, if the quality decreases, then at some point this will kind of decay into a smaller value.
I would expect it to come out say before that could be different. You would expect, I don't see why you would expect that in some countries. Sounds like that's essential to what you're really doing.
Right. So yes. So here, in some sense, as I kind of briefly mentioned before, here our basic assumption is that, of course, there are some lucky pages that somehow becomes much more popular than other pages, much more quickly, because this page is very lucky. And there might be some pages that are not very lucky and takes a lot longer time than other pages in order to become popular. Here, in some sense, what I'm investigating is, for average page, what will be the expected time to its eventual popularity for average case? Of course, there will be some pages that are takes much longer. Yeah, of course, depending on how much resources you have, of course, that really affects things. But I'm kind of, as I said, I'm kind of investigating when there are some pages with a lot of resources and some other pages with little resources, what will be the average case scenario that we can observe. Right. Okay, so that is the results from the random circle model. And let me talk about the second model, which is search dominant model. Okay, so under the random circle model, we made two assumptions. One is a random visit hypothesis, which I think is still reasonable even for the search dominant model. But in case of search dominant model, the first assumption, the popularity equivalence hypothesis, might not be a good assumption to make because now people's visit is significantly affected by the search engine, the rankings of the search engine. So what would be a good way of identifying the relationship between visit popularity and the simple popularity? In order to obtain this relationship, what we have to know is first the distribution or the relationship between the ranking of a page and the number of users who will click on the page. And the second relationship is given the popularity or given the page rank, what will be the ranking of that page within the search results. So if we know these two relationships, then from the page rank or popularity, we know their search result, search ranking. And from the search ranking, we know how many people visit the page. And empirically, there has been a number of studies that somehow measured each of these distributions. For example, Lampert and al. Looked at the Alta Vista query logs, and they tried to estimate what is the relationship between the ranking and the popularity, etc. And based on these investigations, these empirical measurements, now for the search dominant model, we make this hypothesis. So the relationship between visit popularity and simple popularity is simple popularity to the 9/4. So that is kind of the assumption that we make. And again, we still make the random visit hypothesis for the search dominant model. So again, we do the same analysis under this model, and this is the results that we get. Again, horizontal axis is time, and vertical axis is popularity. And if we look at these two, compare these two graphs, the results that we observed from the random sample model and the results that we observed from the search dominant model, we can see two significant differences. One difference is that for the search dominant model, there is no more expansion stage. So it is very unpopular for a period of time, but at some point, its popularity immediately shoots up. And that is mainly because of the search engine promotion effect. Once the page is obtaining certain level of ranking, then search engine drives a lot of user traffic to those pages, so their popularity almost immediately shoots up because search engine drives the traffic to those pages. Okay? And that is why the expansion stage is much shorter than the original random sample model. And the second thing that you can observe is that it takes significantly longer time for the page to become popular under the search dominant model. It took 25 time units for the page to become popular, but under the search dominant model, it now takes about 1,650 time units to be popular. So it takes about 66 times longer for a page to become popular. So in some sense, this is both positive and negative results. Well, one good result is that if search engine is somehow effective identifying the high quality pages, then just simply by promoting those pages for a very brief period of time, they can really make them get aware or become known to the general public within just very brief period of promotion. So that is the positive results. But the negative result is that if the search engine does not do anything at this point, then it may introduce this significant bias in terms of the eventual popularity of the pages. Yeah.
I think that just means something essentially. The popularity, is that your English account?
So here now we kind of abstracted the model a little bit more, right? So under the current model, the definition of the popularity is the fraction of the web users who currently like the page. That is our current definition of popularity.
And you're assuming that the search engine knows that and knows that.
Yes, so of course it is that definition is very difficult to measure in practice, right? So right now there are many different things that search engines are using in order to measure this popularity. One is this click-through information that potentially may be able to collect, or at least the initial thing that search engines started with is this PageRank definition. They measured how many other pages are pointing to it, and then based on this weighted definition, they measured the popularity of the pages. So there can be many different surrogates of the popularity that search engines can use. But we are kind of abstracting it as the fraction of the web users that currently like the page. Yeah.
If quality was changing over time, and treated the search engine as a white box, could I say that there's some kind of transfer function in the black box that's introducing lag, so society would find out about changes in quality slower than under the other model?
Yes, we can actually. Yes, we can think about it that way. Yes.
You could probably estimate what the delay, the lag is.
Yes, actually, yes. That's one thing that we can. We haven't done that investigation yet, but we can. That is one way, one interesting way of thinking about it. Any other question? Okay, so that is the impact of the search engine. And from this theoretical investigation, we could see that the search engines can really introduce significant bias to the popularity evolution of the pages. So given these studies, given these investigations, the last question that we can that we want to explore is how can we minimize this particular bias? What would be a good way of minimizing or reducing this search engine potential bias that search engines are introducing? And there are many different possibilities that we can explore. The simplest idea that we can explore is introducing some level of randomness into the search results. Okay? So right now, the problem is that the popular page, some of these unknown pages, not very popular pages, might still be very high quality, but they never get a chance to be noticed by the user if we just use the popularity-based ranking all the time. Okay? So in order to avoid that problem, we somehow introduce, so out of, let's say, 10 pages the search engines return in the top results, let's say 2 pages or 1 page, we just pick a random page, a random new page, and then we present it to the user. Okay? So by doing that, we somehow give some chance for these new pages that might be of high quality. Of course, there is this kind of trade-off between preserving the quality, the perceived quality of the search results, because if you introduce too much randomness, then the results might not be good, so users might be unhappy. But at the same time, by kind of controlling this randomness in some sense, eventually, if we don't introduce randomness, then the pages that we return, let's say 2 years from today, are still the same set of pages that are seeing today. But if we introduce right amount of randomness, but 2 years from today, the top results will contain a lot more high quality pages that were introduced during this time period. So overall, over a long term, we may be able to increase the quality of the search result. Okay, so that is one idea. And another idea that we can also explore is kind of having separate search results that only shows these up and coming pages. So there is this standard set of pages, set of results that are ranked by popularity. But if you can somehow measure the quality or whatever metric that you want to use, then it somehow identify this new set of pages that might be potentially interesting to the users. Okay? So by doing that, in some sense, we are promoting some of these new high quality pages. And of course, some of the combinations possible. So if we can measure the quality, then we instead of selecting random pages, we may want to introduce these potentially high quality pages out of all the pages that we want to return. Okay, so these are all different possibilities. So let me show you some simple experiments that he did in order to see how effective some of these ideas are. Okay, so we also did some of the theoretical investigation, but for now, due to interest of time, I will just explain the randomness idea for now. So here, what we did was that we collected about thousands of jokes from the internet news groups, and we generated a ranked list of the jokes for these 1,000 jokes. And what we did was we presented this ranked list, and we asked the user just to browse through this ranked list, and then click on the link, and then look at some of the jokes, and then give us feedback on whether they like the joke or not. Okay, so in some sense, this is kind of simulated search with user feedback, from the feedback from the user. And in order to study the impact of the randomization, we generated 2 different ranked lists, depending on using different schemes. So in one case, what we used is what we call popularity based. So the popularity, under this circumstance, the popularity is defined as the number of positive votes that individual jokes have gotten so far. Okay, so out of all the jokes that you have, we ranked them based on how many popular votes those pages have gotten so far. Okay, so that is popularity-based ranking. And the second one is popularity plus randomization. So we rank them based on popularity, but we introduce about 20% randomness in its ranking. Okay, so some of these pages kind of selected randomly out of all 1,000 pages, 1,000 jokes that you have. And we gave these 2 different ranked lists to different set of users, and we tried to see how effective these different ranking schemes are. Okay? And we did these experiments using about 1,000 users who are in CMU and UCLA. And of course, these different ranking schemes will determine the popularity evolution of the jokes. So in order to compare their effectiveness, what we did eventually is counting what fraction of user clicks eventually ended up as positive votes. Because that one somehow measures how happy or how satisfied the users were with our ranking scheme over this long period of time. We ran this experiment for about 1 month. Okay, so in some sense, more positive votes means that more happy users from our region, from this ranking. And when we did these experiments with about 20% randomness introduced, we observed that popularity plus randomization got twice as many positive votes compared to this pure popularity-based ranking. So it does show that it does have really significant potential to improve the search results over a long period of time. The total number of visits were about the same. So the negative votes were significantly smaller compared to the purely popularity-based ranking. Yeah, shifted the movement to the popularity. I don't remember the exact numbers. I think the way that we did was that we kind of wanted to preserve the top quality pages. So for the first 20 pages, we maintained we ordered them based on the popularity. And from the remainder, I think we introduced about like 20% randomness for the remainder pages. I think that is the last scheme, but I have to go back to my paper to see that. Yeah, so in some sense, the exact scheme that he did was that for the first 20 pages, they're ranked by so we ranked everything by popularity. But from the 21st results with 0.2% probability, we just pick some random page and then introduce that there. Okay, so that is 20%.
Shouldn't the randomness be a function of the variance in your estimate?
Yes, yes. We can talk about that later. do I have time, or I think, let me just, we can talk about it a little bit later after I finish, I kind of wrap up. And the second idea that we can also explore is somehow, given our definition, can we somehow come up with some way of measuring this quality, and then use that in order to somehow identify which page might be more promising. And we have some theoretical research showing how we may be able to measure the quality based on the evolution of the popularity. So if you're interested, we can talk about it later after I finish kind of wrap up this presentation. And let me skip this part. So in this presentation, we talked about how the search engines might introduce some bias into the perception of the users. And under this general topic, we talked about web evolution, popularity evolution experiment, where we try to investigate the rich get richer problem. And we also did some theoretical studies about how much bias search engines are introducing by comparing two different web user models. And we talked about some of the new ways of the ranking web pages in order to reduce the potential bias by search engines. And thank you very much for your attention. And if you're interested in more details, these are some of the relevant papers that we have written recently. So you can download these pages from our website, from my website. Do you have any questions?
So the first is, so there's lots of framework for kind of what you've done in terms of rich get richer benefit.
Yeah, yeah.
So it seems to analyze common power law that population that doesn't have anything to grow forms one to decide. So if you go to Microsoft.com, has a lot of pages, and if you go more, it's people versus Microsoft homepage
Right, right.
So if you equate quality with links, which is kind of assumed here, then yeah, I mean the bigger sites are going to get more links, and therefore because quality is more for links, they'll look at more quality. However, search engines, while they use kind of quality, but they don't get quality,
Right.
aren't necessarily dominated by it.
Okay, yeah, yeah.
Dominated more by which query and which the content is made, what's the answer text point,
Right. Right, right.
So I'm not quite sure how your results align with how search engines work. I mean, if it turns out quality is so early on, link count is actually saying it's 20% of the actual ranking, and 8% of stuff. How does your either confirm or deny,
I think it really depends on, I don't have a good answer for that, but this is just my personal interpretation. So I think it really depends on how well we can actually measure the true quality of the page based on other features that are available from those web pages. So if somehow, let's say 20% is based on the popularity and 80% is based on some feature analysis that we do on the web pages. So if the feature analysis is really effective in terms of identifying or predicting whether the users will like those pages or not, then this quality problem may not be too much of a significant problem. But my general sense is that it's kind of, in many cases, it's very random. In many cases, very random. So, and in particular, when these features are kind of similar, the popularity becomes quite significant factor that the search engines consider. So in truth, we don't know, because we don't know how effective this feature analysis is. I don't know, or we don't know how, in reality, when we consider those factors into account, how much of this phenomenon, or how less significant this problem is. So I don't have a good answer. I think it really depends on how well we are using these features that are available from the web pages to estimate how users like it. Given the experience from the prior search engine that didn't take into account the popularity, right now the user's perception of the search results is significantly better than the previous one. So, and for the previous search ranking, the results were very random. So given the previous experience, my feeling is that the feature analysis is not that effective, but this is just my pure guess. So I don't have a good answer in that sense. But my pure guess is that still the popularity is quite significant factors that affects the search results quite a bit right now. But yeah, again, because we don't know, I don't have any good scientific research. I don't have it.
There's sort of the zip law like and everybody, here you're focusing on one end of the curve, but there's quite a bit of discussion out there about the other end of the curve. And people are saying the long tail is longer. Now, I wonder if it's just a grassy thing on the other side of the fence. But, and your argument here, I would think, would be that the tail should be getting shorter. But there's all this discussion that says it's getting longer.
Actually, I'm not sure what we, the
long tail. So the question is, what's the integral under the tail? So how many people want to find stuff that is
yeah, actually, I heard a lot of comments about the tail is at the real part of this power law. So there are a lot of people kind of mentioning that because if we take the integral, then more than very large fraction of the integral comes from the tail part, not from this kind of peak part. So that is the comment that people make. But I have never heard about this comment that the tails are getting better and better over time. So I'm not sure exactly what you are referring to about the tail gets longer or whatever. So in that sense,
well, I'm just referring to the discussion.
Yeah.
I suspect these are. I'm trying to.
okay, yeah.
I'm confused by your evolution at all. So if you're ranking by graph properties, those don't change because people visited the page. Are you seeing that when people visit the page for thinking the golf is linked to it?
Yeah, so that is kind of the original assumption that PageRank made, so in some sense, right? So the reason why PageRank worked reasonably well is because the quality of the page or the fraction of the users who like that page is somehow proportional to that PageRank metric. If that doesn't work, that assumption doesn't hold, then of course the PageRank is completely useless metric. So in some sense, that is kind of the implicit assumption that we make when we want to use this link-based metric.
I'm not arguing with the ranking concept. I'm arguing that people using the structure are going to reinforce it. And I don't know of any evidence for that. If people say it's a good page because it's well linked up, I don't know why to assume they're going to go and add one more link to it. An established structure. I mean,
Absolutely.
it counters this exactly because established structures that have been well linked up are left alone.
Actually, that's a very good point. So let me try to answer the question. I don't know whether it will be a satisfactory answer or not. Let me try to answer the question. Yeah. So one thing, that is one concern that you also have. So some of the very popular pages that are already ranked at the top of the search results, I don't think many people will go extra mile to create one more link because they can easily access to those pages. But what is really important is for those pages, for a lot of these pages that are not ranked at the top of the search results. So for those pages, it's very difficult to get to them because they are ranked at the bottom of the search results. In those cases, the only things that people can rely on is creating their own kind of links in order to directly go there or creating some personal bookmarks. So of course, that will be a significant problem for the pages that are ranked at the top, but they're already ranked at the top, right? So in some sense, for those pages, it's not too much of a problem. For the new pages, where this evolutionary effect is very significant, those pages, I still think that people will keep creating many new links to those pages because they're very difficult to get to. That's our kind of answer. So for those pages, I think our analysis is still valid.
So if you put that in your model, it seems that the behavior has changed. You said people will link to the result if it was underlinked.
Not necessarily. So it's mainly about how much traffic goes to these individual pages, right? So once the popularity is saturated at a particular point, in some sense, our model already says that the popularity will not increase anymore, in some sense. So it's really about how much traffic is driven to which set of pages. So if the top pages that are currently popular are still getting significant fraction of the user traffic, then I think the model is still kind of valid. So it's more of a kind of interpretation part that changes, but the actual analysis and actual model, I don't think it changes. Yeah.
One more comment. So I'm trying to unify the current trend in logging systems. wait, search engine is off. Search engine, you're going there, you're looking for something, you find it, you go in your way. So you're not like to point to it. But if you log in, you read something, and then you want to comment, so you want to make a comment on that blog. Or you can comment on your own blog with your own hashtag URL.
Right.
We're seeing it all the time. You also say there's like slash up stuff, right? Which is something that's supposed to slash dot. And everybody promptly goes
Right.
there.
Yes.
Assuming the site is scammed through slash dot attack, so I always wonder, for speculation, how this would work, looking at blogs and things like that. If you're a small blog, how do you grow over time and do you kind of follow the power lines and what kind of content, stuff like that, versus focusing on search engines stuff?
That's an interesting question. I don't have a good answer for that either. I think, so what will be the behavior? So now in some sense, what we have there is not necessarily a single ranked list, but this kind of different set of ranked lists that individuals are maintaining, and they have these different popularities. So in order to kind of model that, you may have to create this multiple ranked list, and the probability to be a part of that list is based on whatever factor that you can model. So I think it might be a lot more difficult to model, but that might be an interesting way of modeling
I think you have to model, but I think the general framework I give it easy. So, for example, most blogs actually have times for how often are read.
Right.
Or tracking back. So you have a lot of wealth of information about how popular a given thing is.
Yes.
That bracket has to expand.
Right.
So certainly power law will be blog as well, but the question is not so much does there exist one, but how much work, how much effort do you put in?
I see. Yeah.
Article to actually become popular.
Yeah. That's an interesting question.
So I have a question about the search domination model. It is given the model that users only click on pages that show up at the top of the right?
Kind of.
So what I didn't understand is how to pages suddenly get that spike initially, because if they're not in the top two pages, then the assumption is not only of clicking on those pages, and therefore its popularity is not there, and therefore its rank is not there. Therefore, the spike probably is never updated or updated.
Yeah, actually, let me clarify that point. The model is about the search dominant model. So here, in some sense, the balance of the user clicks are kind of skewed toward the top ranked pages. That's kind of the major assumption that we are making for the search dominant model. And because of that, when the page is initially created, when the page is ranked at the bottom, right, the page will get significantly fewer clicks than the case of that under the random sampling model. Right? So that is why it takes significantly longer time for the page to obtain its popularity over time.
But you do assume there are some users.
There's some users, a very small number of users who click on it. So that is why it takes a long time. But once it obtains a particular ranking, because it's very high quality pages, then because now for that ranking, the search engines are driving a lot more traffic to those pages than under the random sampling model. So once the page arrives at that point, then its popularity will grow very rapidly because it's very high quality.
Yeah, so I have a follow-up. If you look at search engine results, to me it seems like the rank list changes quite often. There's a lot of turnover. It seems to contradict what probably your model is, that the rank list is more than
Right.
what do you think is the change in models that sort of word of mouth effect? In this case, the word of mouth is people posting links and forums, blogs, and the like. And that itself, these sorts of word of mouth effects will ensure that instead of popular pages, changes in the model.
So I think this is kind of two separate questions. One question is right now we do observe some reshuffling of the search results over time. So why is the result somehow seem to be different from the prediction of our model? And my kind of answer is that right now search engines are considering many different factors. And of course, popularity is one important factor that they consider, but they also do a lot of tweaking for the second, like other features like number of word count or whatever feature that they have in mind. So my feeling is that but the way that we weight them and how we take them into account changes constantly. They tweak this ranking function all the time. So I think that is why we are kind of observing some of the kind of reshuffling over time. So that is kind of the answer for the first question. The second question, what was the second question?
Well, so I was wondering if so you're saying it's driven because the algorithms are changing.
Right.
And I was wondering if it's driven by all these word of mouth.
Oh yes, word of mouth. Yes, actually yes. So the second question is, of course, in the real world, search engines are not the only mechanism for people actually to discover these pages. Right? So how the world will be different if we take these different factors into account, like word of mouth, or some people do some random surfing. Right? So in case of the word of mouth, I think it really depends on what is the model of the spread of information under the word of mouth. If that follows the same power law factor, then of course the results will be the same. But exactly what will be the kind of the information influence, information dissemination model under the word of mouth, I don't have any good idea. So it really depends on how we model that. So that is the answer. The second thing that we actually did is that in real world, the real world might be combination of the search dominant model and the random surfer model. Right? So some people do random surfing and some people do the search dominant model, the search engine model. And of course, when you combine them, the result is slightly better than what we showed here. So it really depends on what fraction of the users rely on search engines and what fraction of the users, or how many times people rely on search engines, how many times people rely on like random surfing. Yeah. Right.
And that becomes important because then we can target what we do to the way people are and not some abstract or convenient construct. So what I see here, this is a very phenomenal, the layout is a very phenomenological thing. And because of that, the bias in the treatment introduces sort of an outsider influence that then becomes part of the system.
Right.
I think we've done a good job of teasing out some of the influence that design over time. And one of the basic things was around quality. Is there not just the measure of quality that lives out here that we can look to that now and create this quality? No, it's not. There's a democratic measure of quality, a consensus-based measure of quality. And then sort of turns back on itself and influences itself and end up spiral to go up and down.
Thank you.
In ecology, biology, and so on, you think about what happens when you introduce invasive plants into it.
Right. Yeah.
It kind of takes over. However, it's sort of a fact that a certain amount of biological diversity continues to survive no matter what. And I'm wondering if the models that you have here sort of, they can explain what goes on with the invasive plants, they don't really explain ecology and diversity. In B schools and marketing and so on, there's the general belief that there's only
any room for maybe up to 3 major competitors in the category.
Uh-huh.
If you're comfortable, 5 or 6, just hang it up. Maybe that, is sort of what you're describing. I'm sort of wondering if the model that you have here is sort of, suggestive to explaining some of these phenomena that are kind of opposite. And maybe there might be models in some of those other fields that might explain why diversity is somewhat slow.
Yeah, I completely agree. This is just a simple model that we came up with that we think is reasonable, at least for modeling the average case behavior, but this is not a complete model. This is a simplified model of what is really happening. And if you want to study some different aspects of these phenomena, then we may need a little bit more sophisticated model that is tuned for that particular purpose. So this is just the starting point. I don't think this is the end of the work. So if you have some ideas and some right tools to analyze them, I think it would be very interesting to study this problem. Thank you. Thank you very much. Hi, John.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. My name is Ewa.